do to help turn a moment into a movement. So I'd like to invite Patrick to open up the floor. Hi, Patrick.
Hi, Christina. Hi, everybody. Pleasure to be here. Honoured to be here, and I'm looking forward to having a bit of a discussion with you all and answering some nice, easy questions, I hope.
Fantastic. Of course, we will go absolutely easy on you, Patrick, this afternoon. And just a bit of housekeeping, sorry, before we jump in, can everybody please remain on mute? Please, duck on your camera, switch that on if you like to, but please remain on mute and keep the chat alive. If there are any questions, please populate them in the chat, and Patrick and I will address that throughout the course of this discussion. Patrick. So I think that we would love to know a little bit about the man behind the picture. And we will kick off with a really broad question, which we love to pose to our execs here at Rubik. When we are hiring and recruiting people in the market, we start off with a really big question. And that is, is there something unique about the way in which you were brought up that has shaped your view of the world?
Well, that's a really cool question, and 100%. So I was raised by my mother, and she was a very, very compassionate, empathizing woman. And I talk a lot about experiencing my fair bit of racism growing up. And when I say growing up experiencing racism, I'm talking about from my own friends, people that I class as friends. I lived on a council estate, and when back in the day, you could safely play out on your council estate and come back in, and your parents didn't really have to worry about you. So I would go out and play out with my friends, and some days you would hear racial slurs, held at other children, and I guess I'm sort of a bit ashamed to say, but you were just glad it wasn't you that day. If you're an Asian child, you'd hear the P word. If you're a black child, you'd hear the N word, and it was really frequent. And in the odd day, you'd hear your own friends use that word towards you, and then it's something you had to sort of brush yourself off and get on with it the next day and pretend it was almost like it never happened. And I remember my mum always telling me when I used to come in to her and cry and complain and moan, and she would always say to me that they don't know any better, and they've been raised by people who don't know any better, and just don't hold it against them, and just try and be understanding and try and be. She was just that kind of woman. And the thing is, I'm not trying to tell everybody they should be like that, but the reason I'm the way I am is because of my mother. So I always try and look a little bit deeper into why people are doing things. And that's one of the reasons why I want to work with, underprivileged children who get themselves in a lot of trouble, because there's a reason for that. They just haven't been born bad. Their events, throughout their lives have turned them that way. And so that's why I've got a grave interest in that.
And Patrick, so when do things start to get complicated? Because you're absolutely right, and through my own experience, I completely empathise with that. On the school playground, that was par, and that was just the nature of the game. But as you got older, when did it start to really begin to show signs of, well, actually, you should know better? And it's no longer down to the way in which you've been brought up, and this isn't just the influence of your parents. At what point did you start to think, actually, you should be held accountable?
Well, when I actually, I would say possibly when I started secondary school. When I started secondary school, it was almost like the tables had turned a bit, because my primary school was predominantly white, but my secondary school was about 50-50. And so we had a louder voice, and we felt a little bit more empowered. And, we wasn't going to stand for it. And I guess there's a bit of testosterone in there as well. As you're getting older and you feel like physically you're able to defend yourself. And I don't know, you just feel a little bit more empowered and like you're not going to stand for it. So it didn't, racial slurs didn't happen to me a lot in secondary school. Because I just feel like people realized there might be some sort of a comeuppance for them if they tried it, you know. So as we got older, we realized within the school environment anyway, the secondary school environment, it wasn't so bad. It was just when I was in my primary school years, and then later on when I went into the wider world, then you still experienced it. But in secondary school, I that's when things started to change, and when we wasn't accepting it as a group of guys at school. We went to an all boys school, and we kind of left our mark, and we were very, very steadfast in the way we approached things, and we weren't going to accept it.
And so if we kind of jump forward into the future a little bit, Patrick, because we had a really interesting conversation ahead of this chat tonight, and you shared some of your experiences in the work environment. And this is something very close to our heart here at Rubicon, to a lot of the guests this evening that have come to take part of this in this conversation. So I wonder if you could share a little bit about your experience and just walk us through your history at work.
Yeah, so I started work around the age of 20, and I worked in the field of IT, and I worked for mainly investment banks in the city, and that career lasted some 25 years almost. And what I found throughout that 25 years, I think I actually got about 2 jobs from a direct send through your CV or contact a recruitment agency, get an interview, and then get the job. I think I was successful on about 2 occasions in 25 years. All of the rest of my jobs I got, and there was a fair few, were from who I knew, word of mouth, friends of friends. Because what I found is that every time I applied for a job, the Patrick Hutchinson would come up, and they would obviously think, okay, cool, Patrick Hutchinson. And I'm assuming it was like Irish first name, Scottish surname, fairly well spoken over the phone. I think he's possibly a white guy. When I turn up to the interview and they see my black face, then it's like, oh my God. And the thing is that like, they couldn't even hide it. Like, you could see on their faces the disappointment, the dejection that a black guy's walked through the door. They were expecting a white guy. What do we do now? And so, like, 9 times out of 10 of you, as you can imagine, I'm feeling dejected because I can see it on their faces. They're feeling dejected because they don't want to interview me. And as you can imagine, I would never get the jobs. And that happened so many times I lost count. And so it was really just friends of friends that knew that of my work ethic, knew that I was skilled, knew that I was, I was trustworthy, et cetera, that got me jobs. And, so whenever I got a job, I obviously never let anybody down because I knew I'd got in through the back door, so to speak. So yeah, that was my, when it came to trying to get employment, that was the way it always went for me.
And so Patrick, so imagine then in this day and age when organizations are saying that there isn't enough talent out there, and your experience is that actually, well, you're not even making it through the recruitment firm process. What are your thoughts about that when you see it in the media, when you hear it on the news that there's a war on talent? What are your thoughts?
I just think that there's still possibly there's a strong chance they're not trying to let all the talent through the doors. I don't know. Maybe they're worried that their firms will be full of Black and Asian people or something. I really don't know, but I do feel it's almost like they're culling and they're pretending there's not enough talent. But I think there is a huge talent pool within our country. I just think that people possibly don't fit the way that they're expecting you to look. That's what I think anyway.
And so Patrick, so what was life for you after the city? So when you left the corporate world, what did life look like for you thereafter?
So when I left the corporate world, I left about the age of 40. So that's like 10, 11 years ago. I'm 51 now. And I never really wanted to go into IT. I never mentioned that earlier, but I wanted to go into some form of professional sport because I was fairly good at sport when I was young. But my mother just was determined that I was not going to be a sportsman, So she just thought, it's stereotypical and I want you to be an academic. So I said, okay, fine. So I went into IT. But as you know, can only do something that you're not passionate about for so long. And I think 25 years isn't a bad run at something you're not really too passionate about. So when I hit the age of 40, I hit that glass ceiling. There were all the things that were happening within the corporate world, the toxic energy. I wasn't one to go out for drinks on a Friday because I just wasn't into drinking. I was a fitness person. And so I found that I was left out of the cliques within the company. You know, those that went out drinking on a Thursday or Friday night were all in a particular clique, and they would talk, and those people would get promoted, and you just saw it happening with, you know, right in front of your face. And those of us that didn't drink, maybe it wasn't for religious reasons, or you just didn't drink, you could see us getting left at the wayside. And yeah, that glass ceiling existed. And like I say, I think I've mentioned before, in the 25 years that I was working in the corporate industry, I knew one black senior manager and 2 Asian senior managers. And that's in 25 years. Never came across or saw a black board member at all in 25 years. And, you know, I worked at Japanese, Australian, American, French, Dutch, you name it, investment banks, all the big names. I worked for all of them, you know, and so that was that. So yeah, so at 40, I decided enough was enough. I want to do something I'm passionate about, and why stay here, because they don't value me anyway, and I'm not progressing. I may as well work for myself. And so I became a personal trainer because it was a quick turnaround. The certification wasn't long, and I knew a lot about fitness anyway, and so it seemed a natural progression for me. And it was just something I was really, really passionate about, and I knew that I could help people become, you know, better versions of themselves. And so that was the road I went down.
And Patrick, we've got somebody, one of our guests is agreeing with you, saying that, look, this is a common theme, and the promotional conversations happen after work, having a drink in the pub, and historically this has been the case, and still does happen to some extent now. So this is really building a bit of a picture for us in terms of what led you to go out onto the streets that day during the BLM protests, right? So you'd faced discrimination at a young age on the school playground. We know that your work life was only really through your own network. It wasn't through your own, through the fairness, through the equity of a process where you were able to engage with recruitment firms or apply for roles directly with organizations. You had to rely on your own community and network of friends.
Yeah.
So will you just tell us a little bit about that day? Can you just tell us around the feeling and the atmosphere? Because a lot of people understand that when George Floyd was murdered in the States, I still don't think they really understand why there was such a groundswell of emotion here in the UK. And I just wonder if you could just share with us what it meant for you at that time.
Well, can I just add before we go there, because I missed out an important point about the stuff with the corporate and changing my my profession, and that was that when I was working in the city, I did feel like I was suffering from mental trauma a lot of the time, just always depressed and unhappy. And when I changed my profession and started becoming a personal trainer, my mental well-being went up tenfold. I mean, I was earning a fraction of the money I was earning in the city, but I was 100 times happier. And that leads me into, why I was the kind of person that was able to do what I did. Because had I been working in the city, I wouldn't have been probably in a good mental place to probably even do that. Okay, so that's why it's quite important. But to go back to the George Floyd incident, I watched that on TV. I've only ever watched that once, and it was on television because I saw it on TV. I never watched it.
I've still not seen it, Patrick. I've still not seen it.
And I don't even think you should, to be honest. And it turned up on my phone on numerous occasions. I never watched it. I only watched it that one time. And I'll never forget, I was sitting there and a tear ran down my face. But, I wasn't crying, you don't cry. But I just one tear just ran down my face. And it was just the nonchalance of that guy's face, looking into the camera with his hands in his pockets, the knee on George's neck. I couldn't get his face out it was just, that was harrowing. And what it was even worse for me is that nobody held him accountable. None of the other police officers said, listen, what are you doing? Dragged him off. No one stopped him from doing that. Okay, so even if you've got this bad apple, somebody else can step in there and say, listen, what you're doing is wrong, and you need to get off of him. No, they all protected him. They all stopped the crowd from intervening. It was absolutely awful. One of the worst things I've ever seen in my life. And I sat at home and I thought to myself, what can I do? I can't do anything. I'm here on the couch at home. Like, what can I do? I can't do nothing. And then the rant from Toby Robinson, the EDL, English Defence League member, came out. His rant was about protecting the statues, which were already boarded up, mind you. They'd already been secured by the Westminster Council, so they're already protected. But he was calling out all hooligans and thugs, football thugs, far-right extremists to come down to London to protest against the Black Lives Matter movement. And to be honest, had it been anybody else, they may have been arrested for that, because that was like incitement, in my opinion. Yes. Right? It was incitement, and nothing happened and nothing was done. And it makes you wonder, like, how is that possible? And that is when we knew that, you know, we had to go down there, because as a young man growing up in the 90s, I had numerous run-ins with the NF, National Front, and so did my friends. And so we knew that we weren't going to let the BLM protesters, those young protesters, some of them women, some of them children, face these idiots by themselves. So that's why we went down there.
Wow, Patrick. And you, I mean, there's a couple of things that you said there, and you're absolutely right. It was harrowing. It was harrowing for the community to see something like that on the TV. And it was also a risk as well, because during that time, we were right in the middle of the global pandemic. So it was almost, I'm risking my life to go to this protest. It was that deep in a way, because it was, you know, anybody can go to a protest on a Saturday, but in the middle of a pandemic, when actually we weren't quite sure what the safety measures were, and we were all told to keep home, it was something we felt so strongly about that people still took to the streets. And I think what a lot of people don't know, or may have missed in the press, that the person that you actually picked out of the crowd was a former policeman.
Yeah, he was. He was a former police officer. Yeah, I think he spent some 15 to 20 odd years working as a London British Transport Police, I think it was. So it just makes you wonder, you know, how many innocent people did he arrest of colour during his time, you know? If you're anti-Black Lives Matter, you're demonstrating against Black Lives Matter as part of a far-right movement, and you're a police officer, it's almost like a mic drop moment. Like, we've been saying this for many a year, that the police are institutionally racist, and there needs to be change. And then here you are, you have this guy that we save, and it turns out he's an ex-police officer. I mean, what more evidence do you need?
Now, Patrick, since then, so your life has changed dramatically. Since that iconic picture, it's catapulted you to the front of most conversations surrounding the protests and the BLM movement. You've even written a book, Everyone versus Racism. Can you tell us a little bit about your book and what you hope to address?
Yeah, well, I mean, the book, it should be quite an easy read for everybody. It's a 45,000 word book. So, like, for the likes of you super educated people, that's like an afternoon's reading. So it's not too heavy. The book touches on my upbringing as a young man growing up in the council estate in Battersea, and some of the stuff that did happen to me. There's a nice, lovely story in there of how I met my brothers, because I didn't grow up with them, but I met them later on. It's quite a touching story. I touch on some of the harrowing facts of what it's like to be Black in this world, not just here, but, you know, worldwide, like some of the figures and stuff. But I don't go in too heavy and too deep. And then I talk about what we can do as a society to come together to change things. You know, obviously I love it. I love us all to read it, but it really is, you know, aimed at people who are who are not black, because I want them to understand that, I'm not having a dig. I just want to change the way things are now for the betterment of everybody. It's not your fault that you're in this position. So it's not having to go at anybody. And I've had a lot of feedback from people saying, like, they found it was difficult at times to read, but overall they really found it, they were able to digest it, because it wasn't coming at them in a kind of way like some of the literature does, So I'm glad for that, because that's how I wanted it to be. I didn't want it to be too heavy, but I wanted people to finish that book and think what it's like to put themselves in the shoes of a young black boy that grew up in London.
And Patrick, and on that, I think that most, if not all, of our guests here today are allies or on their way to allyship, who want to do something better, who want to make a change. And I would just like to break that down into a couple of segments here. So firstly, thinking about your experience in your corporate life, if you had a message for organizations right now, Patrick, what's something that they could do tomorrow to better support underrepresented communities within their care? What's one thing that you'd advise?
Geez, there's so many things. I feel a lot of people of color have always sort of maybe dumbed themselves down to be accepted in the workspace. When I mean that, simple things like a black woman maybe not having her hair in its full glory because she's worried about being told, that it's too big or whatever. I remember back in the day when my brother had locks and he couldn't, he had to have it cut. He worked for British Airways and they told him to cut his locks because he was an air steward, and they just said that it wasn't appropriate. Like, how? It's your hair, like it's your hairstyle, it's your hair. Why is it not appropriate? Like these things, these microaggressions, they're not right. And it's stuff like that. People need to be able to bring their whole selves to work, and they need to feel like they're accepted for who they are, and they shouldn't, need to dumb themselves down for anybody, because nobody else has to do it. So why should we? That's like one of the main things. There's yeah. A bit of feedback there.
Sorry, I think there's somebody just come off mute there. I think it's Karen. Sorry, Patrick.
Yeah, and just other things I've heard of people told about, the food they warm up in the microwave. Just things that are just a bit insulting to people. So that's the first thing. Outside of the everyday things like that should happen in your workspace and in your office, trying to be more inclusive of everybody and not just leaving the Friday afternoon drinkers as the ones who benefit from the the social circle, let's say, doing things that includes everybody, not just those people that are going to turn up late on a Friday or late on a Thursday. Do things that include everybody, and also be very transparent about salaries. I found out I was earning like 5,000 less than guys that I worked with, that I'd been there like almost 5 years before.
Wow.
And that's because we discussed it. You weren't supposed to discuss what you earned, but people do it all the time. So there need to be transparency when it comes to stuff like that. That's what you can't be keeping these things under the carpet anymore, because it's not right. And it's the same for gender pay gaps too. It's not just a racial thing. It's a gender thing too. These things can't continue.
Yeah. And Patrick, and what about the individual? So that's really some fantastic tips for organizations. So for anybody who's on this in part of this conversation now, they can think about ways of making their organization better. But what about some of our guests who want to know on a personal level, how should they educate themselves? What can they do to help effect this social change that we are all striving for right now? What suggestions do you have for them?
I feel like if you're not like part of the solution, then you're part of the problem. And once upon a time, it was okay to just sit by and sort of not let these things trouble you because it wasn't happening to you. It didn't affect you. But we're in a space now where that's no longer acceptable. And if you're quiet, you're on the side of the oppressor, as they say. And I feel like when you do see things happening, or when you do have people of color speaking up about things, like the way it's really going to get addressed is if our white counterparts jump on side with us and back us and support us. That's where you really add the fuel to the fire, because other than that, it's just, people of color moaning and groaning and complaining and whining. That's what it looks like. But if we're all there together, like I say, it's not black v white or anything. It's everybody versus racism.
And Patrick, I've just got one more question before I just open up to the team to check in if they've got questions for you themselves. But how did you turn a single moment into a movement? Because this could have been overlooked in yesterday's news for many other people in this world. It was something which happened that it wasn't through design. They happened to capture a moment which has now escalated. You're having conversations with Prince Harry. You're on the front cover of GQ magazine. You've written a book. How did you turn that moment into a movement, Patrick?
I'm looking at Greg, man. He looks happier than me. Like, you know what? I can't take the credit for that, I'm afraid. I have to give the credit to Troy Davis, who's our managing director, because I've got to be totally honest. When it all happened, I realized it was a good thing, a wonderful thing, but I didn't expect it to blow up in the way it did, because I just thought I'm just doing the right thing. I was in the right place at the right time and I did the right thing. Wouldn't everybody do that? And then it dawned on me, people were saying, no, lots of people wouldn't do that, because of who he was. Most people would have left him. And so because of that, I realized the moment was a bit iconic, and Troy just said to me, like what you did, not many people would do. And we can't let this moment remain static. We have to turn this thing into a movement. So he's a bit of a brand specialist, and he created the logo, and this whole Yukai was originally his idea, and we all came together with the name United to Change and Inspire. That was a collective, a collection of all of our input. But in terms of the logo and the vision, that's all been Troy Davis's. It's his handiwork. So I'm only now really buying into it and believing it after lots and lots of people telling me that this is something that is going to go down in history. Your great grandchildren will know about it, or who you were. It's going to be in books, in the museum. Like I'm just only now sort of coming to terms with how deep this thing really is. But at first, I didn't really realize. I've got to be honest.
And there's something really humbling about that, Patrick, because you wouldn't have realized how big it was, because it was just the right thing to do. It was just the right thing to do in that moment. And it's actually been the world response to it that has allowed you to see how much of a, how much of a huge kind of sacrifice that was on your point to put yourself out there. When you could have just stepped over him, like many other people might have done in your situation. Patrick, it's been fantastic having this conversation with you, and I really must ask bring in the team. I'm going to open up to Greg first. I think he's got 2 questions that he wants to field from some of the guests which have come through in the chat, and Kamal afterwards. So Greg.
Thank you very much for that, Christina. Patrick, amazing. Thank you for sharing great insights, obviously, on your journey that led you to where you currently are at the present moment. We're opening the floor, obviously, for the questions as well. No proposal, guys, but we're okay for any other questions that we can pass on to Patrick as well. And one of the questions, firstly, that I wanted to ask, and you talked about earlier on in terms of the different beliefs and so forth. And how difficult was it for you to actually put aside your own personal conviction in order to help someone else with conflicting beliefs to yours?
Yeah, I mean, for me, as an individual, it wasn't even something I even thought about. I just was in the right place at the right time, and it was an instinctive thing to do. I didn't even see him as a far right protester. I saw him as someone who could possibly get killed, and so I just jumped in there and did what I thought was the right thing to do. So I didn't even have to think about him being a far right protester and why he was there and what he was getting up to prior to that situation. None of that sort of came to my mind. All I could compute at that moment in time is that this man may die and I'm standing here and I need to do something about it. And it was as simple as that. I just simplified it right down to its core, and that was it. And then had the presence of mind to actually physically try and, pick him up and carry him out of there as well, because there were protesters trying to stop, him being attacked at the time. But you can only do so much stopping, because then you'll start getting hurt and then it just gets that way out of hand. So I just thought the best thing to do is pick him up and take him over to the police, because I could see them where they were, and I knew I could do it. So I did.
And that picture alone just says a lot, because in that moment where you are helping someone who's got conflicting beliefs to yours, at the same time, there's also people who are, have similar beliefs to you, but not agreeing with the action that you've taken. Yeah. And that's where it really takes to actually be the spark, to spark something different, to be an ally for the greater good, for the greater cause, to advance that particular movement and that conversation as well. Lastly, which I wanted to also pass over to you as well, how do you feel about the future of equality and inclusion in our communities at the moment? And why is it really important to take an active step?
I feel like the future is bright. I know some people beg to differ, but obviously we all have our own opinions. And the reason I think that is because at this moment in time, it's almost like a movement. There's so many things on so many different platforms changing, and there's so many conversations being had. And like, this moment can't go without there being some real change, because we won't allow it. And because racism isn't going anywhere for now. And all it takes is some chanting at a match by some racists, or, another Black person being killed by police in America, or someone being wrongfully arrested, like Bianca Williams. All it takes is an incident, and then things are back again, right? So until racism is eradicated, the movement, this moment won't be eradicated. And if racism is eradicated, then brilliant, that's what we want, right? So it's I see it as a win-win. It's either we eradicate racism and then we don't have to worry about all this stuff, which isn't going to happen overnight, or racism is going to still be here and we're going to continue the good fight until it's no longer here. I mean, I honestly don't think we'll be the beneficiaries, but I do think our children and grandchildren will be at some point, because if you look back, history shows that things have changed. It might be slow, but it changes. And we're at a point now where there's another moment where they're going to come back to this time and say, wow, all these things changed for the better 20 or 30 years ago when they look back at this moment.
Thank you, Patrick. And Kamal, you've got a couple of questions here. We've got couple from the guests.
I do. So Patrick, firstly, I mean, amazing hearing your responses, and your journey to this point is just incredibly inspiring to everyone on the call. And the questions really have been amazing from the audience as well. And Samantha, I just want to ask her question. So she says, what are your thoughts on the term unconscious bias? Great to hear, what you think about that.
You know what? I until the term became quite prevalent, I hadn't really heard about it, but it's a real thing. It's a real thing because people do, I believe, subconsciously or unconsciously, treat certain people better than other people, and they don't even realize they do it. And I've had conversations with friends, and they've admitted unconscious bias towards their own children. So you have two children, and one may get themselves in a few more scrapes than the other, and the other child that doesn't get themselves into so much trouble, you know, sort of gets favored in ways, but the parents don't realize it. Okay, so unconscious bias is a real thing, and this is what happens to us in society. You know, because of stereotypes that have been projected onto us, not anything factual, just stereotypes, and the media at times have helped project those stereotypes. People have treated us in a certain way, and it's not even something they're doing consciously. It's something they're doing subconsciously. They don't even realize they're doing it, and that's why I believe it's a real thing, unconscious bias, and it does exist. And to be honest, we've all got a bit of it in us to some degree. You know, regardless whether it's race, you could be discriminating people in other ways. It doesn't have to just be about race, but we've all got the ability in us to sort of be unconsciously biased towards something or someone.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And sorry, I just think as well, you know, if there is a way that you can change that and help yourself in that way, then, you know, it's important and your responsibility to take that step. And, you know, you do see a lot of people, you know, doing unconscious bias training and reversing that whole system of thought. So
exactly,
yeah.
and believe and knowing it and accepting it, that you have that trait in you is a start. Like, if you don't accept it, then how are you going to fix it? But as long as you accept it and you realize you realize, okay, I'm doing it, then that's a start. Yeah. Great.
And then the second question I had as well was from Frankie, I believe. Let me just bring it up here. Sorry. So, somebody said, our experience of civil rights in the UK is obviously different to the US. What do you think is the difference for us in the UK, and who were your role models growing up?
In the UK?
Yeah. Wow.
It's a whole nother level, isn't it, really? Like, civil rights in the US it's a whole nother level, and we're going back to you know, Malcolm and Martin and you name it. I mean, I actually got to meet, well, not say meet, but I had a conversation with Reverend Al Sharpton over on GM Good Morning Britain, which was quite emotional for me. The fact that the things that the man said about me was like, oh my gosh, like, really? Like, wow. So that was pretty deep. But over here, we're not on that level in terms of civil rights, but the people that I looked up to when I was growing up in this country, we didn't have too many at my age. I mean, it was like, you know, Sir Trevor McDonald and Floretta Benjamin, you know, Sir Lenny Henry. These are the people that I saw on TV growing up. If you're talking about British role models, then those are the people that I kind of looked up to, because they're the only people I saw on TV. Sidney Poitier, the actor, you know, my mum used to be a big fan of his. So those are the people that I saw on TV and that I looked up to.
That's really interesting, and, you know, myself included, really inspiring people. And, you know, I think it's actions like yours as well that inspires people to then, you know, be bold and, you know, make change and feel like they can contribute in ways that are really going to make a difference and impact society. So yeah, I really have loved hearing your thoughts and your opinions today. Christina, do we have time for a few more questions, or would you like to
Yeah, we're just gonna we have a hard stop, but I'm just going to ask this one question, which has just quickly come in. So Frankie Gilman said, hearing Patrick's experiences at primary school age was eye-opening and upsetting. As a parent, I'm hoping to become a school governor. Dealing with racism is always on my mind. Are there any thoughts that you have on how we can make schools, on how schools can be making a difference?
Yeah, I think you really have to have, the only way it can work, I believe, is if you've got real allies in place. So like the head teacher, for example, I've been doing a lot of talks in some schools, and I met a head teacher the other day who left me feeling inspired, because he was determined to make a change in his school. And when you speak to people like that, you feel empowered, and you feel like, you know what, you know, we can all do this. When you have people on side like this particular head teacher, you feel like, yeah, we're on the right track. But people have got to be invested, fully invested, like this teacher I'm talking about. and not everybody is. You know, some people are just here to tick boxes, and just to, you know, fill quotas, and they're not really about, you know, that equality life, or about that inclusion or diversity life. They're just doing it because they have to, or they're being told to. So that's the problem we have. If you've got the right people in the right positions, then yeah, it will be light work, to be honest. But if we don't have the right people in the right positions, then we're always going to sort of get to a particular point, and then nothing really gets done. And then, yeah, they hope to sweep it all under the carpet, and then nothing changes.
And Patrick, you're absolutely right. And the organisations and schools that do it well understand that they need to reflect the communities that they serve, and that they become better as an organisation, as a school. They innovate, they're more creative when they have difference around that table. So it's really kind of bringing home the benefits, even if it starts that way, the benefits to them as that business or as that institution. And then they start to see the longer term effects of that, the longer impacts.
Like I saw it pop up there. Someone said they have to walk the walk, and that's exactly, you know, what I mean. You know, you have to walk the walk. You can't just talk the talk. I mean, you know, the statistics bear out that, you know, equality, genuine equality, is like is brilliant for society and brilliant for your country. It builds for a much more productive country. Much more mentally stable and happier people individually. Like when things are equal, you know, when things are uneven and there's inequality about this, there's a lot of mental trauma. There's because some people are suffering and some people ain't, and then there's jealousy and envy and all these things happen in society. So when everybody's on a level playing field, it's a lot better for everybody, to be honest. And you have a much more productive community, a much more productive country as a whole.
Patrick, and on that, I mean, thank you so much for spending time with us this afternoon. Really, really powerful insights. And I would just recommend to everybody who still remains with us on this conversation this evening to go out and get Patrick's book. It's Everyone versus Racism, A Letter to Change the World. Fantastic. There we go. There we go, as demonstrated. Thank you so much, Patrick, for joining us. And thank you to our guests for joining us on our headline guest with Patrick Hutchinson to open up our Black History Month. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful evening. Take care.
Thanks for having me. Take care,
Thank
everyone.
you so much. Thank you,
Frankie. Thank you, Kate.
That was really great.
Lovely to see you.
Bye.
Bye,
Patrick,
Fraser.
Patrick, if you ever feel like a day trip to Suffolk to come up to our school, please do.
There we go.
Yeah, we ordered
Be that spark in Suffolk, Patrick. Be the spark in Suffolk. Thank you, Memoria.
We ordered your book while you were talking. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Great. Yeah, take care.
I hope you enjoy it. Get a message to me and let me know how you get on with it, what you think.
Will do. Thank you. Thank you, Christina.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Memoria. Bye, Kay.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you, Patrick. It was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Memoria. What a name. I'm never going to forget that name, Memoria.
Yeah. Thank you, Samantha, as well, for all of your comments and questions.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome,
really
Christina. Thank you for organising, and pleasure meeting you, Patrick.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sam.
Bye.
Bye,
Take
Kay.
care.